The Hartson family's Victorian home stood as a monument to elegance, its polished surfaces and antique furnishings whispering tales of a bygone era. Each room was a carefully curated homage to the past, filled with heirlooms and artifacts that spoke of history and heritage. One chilly November evening, as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled within, a subtle anomaly in their grand hall mirror caught Sarah Hartson's eye. She had always admired the mirror's ornate frame and the way it seemed to capture the light, but tonight something was different. A glimmer, a distortion, something not quite right. She dismissed it as a trick of the fading light, but a seed of unease had been planted. The glimmer seemed to dance just out of her line of sight, teasing her with its elusive presence. Later that night, as the house settled into its nocturnal silence, Sarah's husband John noticed it too. He had always been a skeptic, but the fleeting movement in the mirror's reflection was undeniable. A fleeting movement in the mirror's reflection, a shadow flitting across its surface. It was as if the mirror held a life of its own, a hidden world just beyond the glass. Their initial amusement quickly faded as the occurrences became more frequent, more pronounced. What started as a curious oddity soon turned into a nightly ritual of watching and waiting, their nerves fraying with each passing day. Their once comforting home began to feel oppressive, each reflection carrying an unsettling weight. The mirrors, which had once been mere decorations, now seemed to dominate the space, their presence looming large and menacing. The antique mirrors, once admired for their intricate designs, now seemed like watchful eyes, their glassy surfaces reflecting something more sinister than the mundane. The delicate etchings and flourishes now appeared as twisted, mocking faces. As days turned into nights, the Hartsons found themselves drawn to the mirrors, a mixture of dread and fascination pulling them in. They couldn't help but stare, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious phenomena, even as a deep-seated fear gnawed at their hearts. The disturbances escalated from fleeting shadows to whispers, soft and indistinct at first. Barely audible murmurs seemed to emanate from the mirrors themselves. John and Sarah would catch snippets of conversations, hushed tones that sent chills down their spines. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be trying to convey a message, but the words remained garbled, unintelligible. The Hartsons were living a nightmare, trapped in a home that no longer felt like their own. Fear turned to terror when the whispering voices started calling them by name. Sarah would be brushing her hair in the vanity mirror when a raspy voice would hiss, "Sarah!" John would see a shadowy figure lurking in the reflection of the hall mirror, and a voice would growl, "John!" Their reflections began to change, morphing into grotesque parodies of themselves. Sarah would glimpse a haggard, gaunt version of herself, her eyes hollow and filled with an unspeakable sadness. John would find his reflection twisted into a malevolent sneer, his face contorted in a horrifying grimace. The once familiar faces in the mirror had become menacing strangers. They were trapped, forced to confront these distorted images every time they dared to look at their reflections. The mirrors, once symbols of vanity and beauty, were now portals to a terrifying otherworld. The Hartsons tried to cover the mirrors, to block out the horrors they reflected, but it was no use. The entities trapped within seemed to be growing stronger, their power seeping into the very fabric of the house. The entity in the mirrors seemed to be most active at the stroke of midnight. As the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 12 times, a palpable wave of cold air would sweep through the house, and the mirrors would frost over. The Hartsons would huddle together in their bed, their hearts pounding in unison with the rhythmic ticking of the antique clock. They knew that at the witching hour, the entity would make its presence known, and they were powerless to stop it. Their once peaceful home had become a prison, a battleground in a supernatural war they never asked to fight. They were prisoners in their own home, held captive by an unseen force that seemed to be feeding off their terror. Section 5. Seeking Answers. Desperate, the Hartsons sought explanations for the terrifying events. They consulted paranormal investigators, historians, anyone who might shed light on the dark history of their home. The investigators brought in EMF readers and EVP recorders, their equipment buzzing with unusual activity whenever they neared the mirrors. Historians uncovered a tragic tale of the home's original owners. A wealthy merchant and his beautiful wife, both found dead in the house under mysterious circumstances. Local legend whispered of a jealous lover, a vengeful spirit, and a curse upon the mirrors. The Hartsons were living a ghost story come to life. The investigators confirmed their worst fears. Their home was indeed haunted, and the entity trapped within the mirrors was not going to rest until it had claimed their souls. Armed with the knowledge that their home was haunted by the spirits of the former owners, the Hartsons sought a way to appease them. They had tried everything from ignoring the disturbances to seeking help from local clergy, but nothing seemed to work. The disturbances only grew more intense, leaving the family desperate for a solution. A paranormal expert suggested a ritual, a seance of sorts, to communicate with the entities and hopefully free them from their mirrored prison. The expert explained that the spirits were trapped in the mirrors, unable to move on to the afterlife, and that the ritual could help release them. They gathered in the grand hall, candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they prepared for the ritual. The air grew heavy with anticipation and fear. Each member of the family could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that this could be their last chance to find peace in their home. Following the expert's instructions, they placed their hands on the surface of the largest mirror, their reflections staring back at them with an eerie intensity. The mirror seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if the spirits within were aware of what was about to happen. As the clock chimed midnight, the candles sputtered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The sudden loss of light heightened their senses, making every sound and movement feel amplified. A bone-chilling cold enveloped them, and the mirror began to vibrate, its surface rippling like water. It was as if the barrier between the living and the dead was thinning, allowing the spirits to make their presence known. The Hartsons held their breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that the next few moments would determine the fate of their home and their family. The tension was almost unbearable as they waited for a sign that the ritual had worked. The mirror's surface turned into a swirling vortex, pulling the Hartsons into its depths. They tumbled through darkness, their screams swallowed by the void. When they finally landed, they found themselves in a cold, damp cellar, chained to the walls. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. It was the vengeful spirit of the merchant's wife, her face contorted in a mask of rage and despair. She blamed the Hartsons for her fate, mistaking them for the descendants of her unfaithful lover. The Hartsons pleaded with the spirit, explaining they weren't who she thought they were. But their words fell on deaf ears. The spirit was consumed by hatred, her thirst for revenge unquenchable. They were trapped at the mercy of a vengeful ghost. John, remembering the tales of the merchant's love for his wife, appealed to the lingering remnants of her humanity. He spoke of the love that must have bound them, urging her to see that her rage was only hurting her and keeping her trapped in her pain. Sarah, seeing a glimmer of recognition in the spirit's eyes, joined her husband's plea. She spoke of the power of forgiveness, reminding the spirit that holding on to anger would only poison her soul further. The spirit hesitated, the shadows that clung to her flickering as if in a wind. Their words were reaching her, chipping away at the wall of rage she had built around herself. Tears streamed down the spirit's face as she finally remembered the depth of her love for her husband. Each tear was a memory, a fragment of a life once filled with joy and sorrow, now coming back to her in a flood of emotions. The shadows that had clung to her began to dissipate, replaced by a soft, ethereal glow. It was as if the darkness that had held her captive for so long was finally lifting, allowing her true essence to shine through. With a sigh of relief, she turned to the Hartsons, her eyes filled with gratitude. They had been the key to unlocking her memories, to helping her find peace after so many years of torment. She thanked them for reminding her of who she truly was, of the love that had defined her life. Her voice, though faint, carried a warmth that touched the hearts of the living. With a final sad smile, she faded away, finally free from her earthly bonds. Her spirit ascended, leaving behind a sense of calm and closure. The cellar began to crumble around the Hartsons as they were pulled back into the mirror and deposited back into their own world. The transition was abrupt, the once eerie silence replaced by the sound of crumbling stone and shifting earth. The Hartsons emerged from the ordeal shaken but forever changed. Their faces bore the marks of their harrowing journey, but their eyes held a newfound strength and understanding. They had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious, their compassion and empathy the keys to breaking the cycle of hatred and despair. They knew that their actions had not only freed the spirit, but had also healed a part of themselves. However, they knew that the line between the living and the dead was thin, and that some horrors lurked just beyond the reflection. The mirror, now just an ordinary object, held a faint reminder of the spirit they had helped, a testament to their courage and compassion.